I'm Steve Vibronics, and this is the Life in Dub podcast, talking to people who live their lives in dub and reggae. Episode number 35. Welcome to the 35th episode of the Life in Dub podcast. I hope everyone is doing okay out there. Thanks for taking the time to listen to Life in Dub and for all the messages of support for the podcast. It's great to know it's being enjoyed. Life in Dub is the podcast that digs deep into reggae and dub history, delivering in-depth interviews with people that live their lives through music. If you want to get in touch with any questions or just want to say hi, the best way is to email me, vibronics@gmail.com. If you want to listen back to any of the previous interviews, you can find them all at lifeindub.com. They're also on Spotify and on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts and even on YouTube. I will be taking a little break from Life in Dub over the summer, but the podcast will be back again before you know it with loads more in-depth interviews from the world of reggae and dub. This week, I want to talk a bit about a new album that I've made with Indica Dubs. It's called The Highest Principles of Dub, and it's a double vinyl and digital album with 14 brand new tracks of heavyweight dub mixed for the sound system. Half by me here in the Dub Cupboard studio, and half by Indica Dubs in his own studio. I love a good dub album. It always takes me back to the heyday of dub albums when Scientist, Joe Gibbs, Mad Professor, King Tubby were putting out albums of pure dub. This one we're really pleased with, and a lot of work went into it. When you have 14 new tracks, it takes a lot of time to write, mix and master, and a pure dub album is a pretty rare sight these days, so for me it's great to continue this fine tradition. So check it out, Indica Dubs meets Vibronics, The Highest Principles of Dub is heading your way. This week, my guest is Adrian Sherwood, the legendary dub producer from the south of England behind the On You label and so many groundbreaking music projects. We talk a lot about those early days when Adrian was immersing himself in music and about what it's like to release, distribute and hustle music, as well as his work with unforgettable artists like Prince Far-I Bim Sherman. Adrian is a great guy with a unique perspective on music, so enough of me, let's get on with the interview. So, Adrian Sherwood, welcome to the Life in Dub podcast.
Thank you, Steve.
Just as I mentioned earlier on, we were kind of setting up the interview, is I ask everybody the same question at the beginning of the podcast, which is to name a track that's like really important, really influential, just something to kind of kickstart the whole proceedings. So, never easy to pick one track, but I don't know if you've got an example of one that kind of springs to mind.
It's hard to choose one tune because I think when you get involved with how my involvement with falling in love with Jamaican music or reggae music it started out where as a kid I kind of liked the mad records, the rude ones, the ones with funny beginnings, things like Skank in Bed, like by Scotty and Lorna Bennett, or Way You to the Ball by U-Roy, or Al Capone, Prince Buster, going back to Scar days. But what really I got off on just was all that mad stuff like Census Taker, Rupie Edwards, or Hijacked by Joe Gibbs, or even Lottery Spin, Zapow and all those kind of just what on earth's going on there? The mad ones with the intros. And obviously Lee Perry was master at that, having, baby noises, going back to, People Funny Boy and things like that. So my to choose one tune is very hard. But we used to love the records with a little bit of a spoken intro, and then, Boys Town Ska and things like that, and then evolving into the records where you just had a little bit of a toast on it and an instrumental, and that was where I started before I started getting into the great singers. And I think the first singer that really got me was Bob Andy. I must be honest, really started moving away from the gimmicky stuff when I heard things like Life and songs like that, by Bob. And it's neither to say one tune. I can't honestly pick one tune. Prince Buster, all Prince Buster stuff as well. Just like amazing. Just the mischief and the fun and all that in those records. I miss greatly in modern music where it's also calculated. It seems our own dub world. Everything's going through the motions, calculated. You need those records had a charm and a almost an innocence, naivety, or just a sense of madness about them. That I just if I'm doing anything, my first effort is to try and put some charm into the stuff, because that's what those records oozed. They were. That's what got me.
And you've been listening to reggae since whenever then, by the sound of things. I mean, you're talking about going about quite a long time. I mean, you were young, I guess, when you encountered it.
Since I was 10, yeah, which would have been 1968.
It was brand new then as well. It was like just the freshest thing around, I guess.
Well, I had my mate's sister, Jean. I'd sit in her bedroom and she'd had a little box, one of those little boxes that you open the top off, and a pile of sevens, and we were also, I was listening to, it wasn't just reggae. I got more and more obsessed into reggae probably by the time I was 12. But as a 10-year-old, you'd be hearing the songs, and it's funny, I played with Madness a few times, and it's really weird because you can see what happened. The ones I liked, all the ones I've mentioned, they weren't threatening, they weren't like kind of alienating any of the audience. They were kind of quite engaging for everybody. The rude records, the energy and the happiness and the fun of them all. And then when it started getting a bit too black for the types of people that would perhaps find that difficult, I can understand why, your average, white kid, skinhead, whatever, who loved reggae, wouldn't really get off on the Black Awakening stuff, and it's still, now you look at it, it's like a kind of old people's home, those lovely Madness things of people who love that period,
I know what you mean.
Well, I get it, I understand it, but and it was fun, I personally got into the stuff, the kind of Garveyist stuff, and a lot of people moved away from that. They that's why when the things like two-tone came along, they were filling a gap that had been left by the departure of a lot of people into the more black awareness and Garveyist stuff that was that I so loved. But
so what was it that kept you to when like friends and stuff started moving away and listening to other music and whatever? What kind of kept you? What is it about reggae that kind of kept you listening to it? Do you think?
Well, the friends I kept were the ones that kept listening to it. The ones, anyone who was off listening to Pink Floyd or Love or any of those kind of Yes or any of that shit, it was like, leave me. Sorry, it's good whoever likes it, but. I couldn't pretend to like it. I thought a lot of them pretending to like it because it did nothing for me. The soul scene was great. We used to go to. I used to go to. I loved all the bands. T-Rex, Mungo Jerry. I grew up with all. I loved all that. I also used to go to from High Wycombe, where I went to school, to soul clubs in London, Watford, but particularly like the Devil's Den and the California ballrooms in Dunstable. I saw lots of the great soul acts there, and I loved that. But that didn't, I saw James Brown when I was 15 at the Rainbow in Finsbury Park.
Nice.
That period, though, we were all still listening to the burgeoning, brilliant stuff, everything coming from Jamaica. It was just...
And did you get to see any of the bands play or go to any dances or anything in that time? Because there were some great tours and obviously great sound systems playing.
Here's the mad one. I went to, I was with Joe Farquharson, who owned the Newlands Club in High Wycombe, who was the nearest thing I ever had to a dad, because my dad died when I was 5, and Joe looked after me, really, and brought me into the business. And we went, I've got to think this has got to be 71, 72, I can't remember what year, but to the Edmonton Sundown. And there was an Ethiopian fundraiser for a famine that had happened then. Somebody could probably give me the dates better. And I clearly remember that Bob Marley and the Wailers were on the bill. And I think it was Nicky Thomas was headline, and like a lot of the, so I saw a lot of these ones. Like
in High Wycombe?
Winston Green. No, this was at Everton. We travelled up, and the Wailers were on stage, And we had to go to the back to collect some money, and we were just arriving as they were finishing. So I saw them on this event. I've got this vague memory of like this mad day going to a fundraiser, and they weren't top of the bill at all. We got there, and I'm sure it was even in the day. I've got a really, really weird thing on this, what happened. So I'm not claiming some kind of thing. I just remembered some weird snapshots to being very young. Ken Booth I saw, because Ken Booth was close friends with Raymond Reds, bless him, he's passed, who was the printer at Palmer. And Reds was childhood friends of Ken's. So I saw Ken. I went with Ken and Reds to the Q Club in Parade Street when I was 14 or something. When he had everything I owned a hit, I went there with him. And I had jeans on. I was underage. So I was like kind of privileged to be brought in there. I saw a lot of them, Nicky Thomas, Owen Gray, a lot of the artists that were English based. Johnny Nash opened the Newlands Club, and he was friends with Joe Farquharson.
What were these gigs like? I mean, what are your memories of them?
Well, they were great. They were fun. They were all really fun, and they were entertaining. So I did shows as a young DJ when I was 13 with Judge Dredd, Emperor Roscoe, Dave Lee Travis, Johnny Walker. I did some funny shows. And sound system wise, I saw some of the early ones. The Scorpion Hi-Fi from Southall was one of the first ever sound systems going back to the 50s. And he was school friends with Joe. And he was also the uncle of Shara Nelson. And he said, "Oh, look, I've got my young niece. Can you check her out?" And that's how I come to record Shara when she was very young. And then she went on from there. We introduced her to Greensleeves and then Massive Attack. But she was the niece of Joe's school friend.
And do you remember what going to a sound system session was like when you were young back then? I mean,
I used to go to blues parties, house parties in my area with my friends. You know, they were nice as parties because you'd go to the party, and the beauty of it was that all age groups would be there. So you'd have your, troubled teenager. I thought that thing was wonderful. The Steve McQueen series was fantastic. Did you see it?
Yeah, and I was talking to Dennis Bavell. He was on the show recently.
Wonderful. I thought it was wonderful. The whole series was great because it's how I remembered it. You know, the young girl sneaking out to get away from her religious mum, the troubled young kid at the dance, and people kind of keeping an eye on him, not judging him too much, not hurting him, kind of watching him because they could tell he was troubled. But you'd go to a house party and there'd be like 2-year-olds dancing, and there'd be like a 70-year-old, and there'd be somebody doing a granddad dance in the corner, drunk on rum. And I was very blessed to go to a lot of those when I was young. And as I got a bit older, I'd go to the blues parties in the town from when I was 15. But from the age of 12, I was going to house parties. It was because of my friends. I had black friends at school, and their parents, they came to my house stayed at mine. We ate at each other's houses, and I discovered what good food tastes like. So.
And you talked about like DJing as well, like DJing at a really early age. So you were like DJing as a kid, by the sound of things.
Yeah, I started with my friend called Steve Graham. There was a school that had we were going down to the market getting records off the Joe Farquharson also had a market store in High Wycombe. I remember getting Steve and I bought like Hijack by Joe Gibbs, a lot of the records from the 60s, because Joe had worked for Palmer, and I worked for Palmer as well from very early age. The Palmer, Jeffrey, Clary, and Harry. Clary was Harry, and Carl, and Jeffrey owned the Apollo Club. I went to the Apollo Club from when I was 14, got smuggled in there as well. But so I was very lucky to be amongst such great people. So I knew a lot of the elders and, big players, Webster Schroeder, Joe Sinclair, I'll go on and on and on. I knew a lot of the people who were started the early Trojan with Lee Goptal, and obviously the Palmer family. And I ended up starting the first distribution company with Joe in '75 when I was 17. So out of the building at Palmer, took the idea off us and put Jetstar in 78 Craven Park Road, where I've worked in my summer holidays as a kid. So I've been very blessed. I worked with, I was amongst some great senior, very influential people, and it is literally who you associate yourself with. I was, amongst those people, and it gave me credibility, I suppose, or a protection. Chips Richards phoned Dennis Bovell when I was 19 and said, "Look, I've got Adrian, who works with us. He's just made his first record. Can you get the studio and mix it for him?"
That's a connection, isn't it?
Yeah. So I've known Dennis since I was 19, and he mixed my first record.
It sounds like there was no other option for you apart from music then.
No. By the time I'd got the bug, but you've got to say I'd gone to college when I was 17 and left after a few months. Hadn't really worked out with a girl there. I was had enough, and Joe said, "Look, let's start a distribution company." So from then on, I started one record label after another, distribution company, lots of different record labels, and I've been very blessed.
What drew you into that kind of distribution? And because it's like, it's a funny old business, like the music biz, when you get inside it like that.
It was pioneer. In those days, there wasn't a distributor. Really, there was what's his name? Kasner had a company. Kasner, who had Black Skin, Blue Eyed Boys, that label. He had a kind of distribution company, and there were a couple, but not specific. So we had Joe and Adrian, not Jamaica, JA Distribution, and we were concentrating, taking all the labels in London and distributing them all outside of London. That's how we started. And then we started the same year. I was a junior director. I've still got the articles and memorandum for Carib Gems. I started the Croatian Rebel label, which we put out Marijuana World Tour, and So We Stay. Joe Wush on it. Bless him, Neville, because he was my good friend. I love Neville Beckford, Joe Wush. And I was involved in lots of other little things. I started Hit Run and then 4D Rhythms. I got out of the distribution. That went wrong because they weren't giving as much percentage. They were the bigger labels, then we were getting squeezed for credit by the likes of the HMV chain. And at one stage, we had 5 staff in a record shop in Harlesden, and I was 19. I was 19.
If you look back at how things are done so differently now. But back then, long distance phone calls were expensive, and it's kind of just a different world of communication.
Well, we used to import records, and I used to import them. Firstly, we imported them from Dickie Wong. Dickie Wong was Joe's brother-in-law, and he had a company called Tit for Tat, a production company, and a club called Tit for Tat. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
In Jamaica.
Okay.
And the house band there was Sly. Every time I see Sly, I have a chat to him about this funny period, because this was pre-Robbie. He was Lloyd Parks was his bass player.
Mm-hmm. We the People band.
Called Skin, Flesh and Bones, which came out of Tit for Tat from Dickie Wong, out of the club, as far as I understand. And we imported some records from him. And then after I met Far-I, I started importing every month or so, just for a while, only for about a year, but directly from John Dredd at Cash and Carry. So I had all the Big Youth, Gregory Isaacs, and Cry Tough things I was importing. So I had quite a good little run. But if you made a mistake and got a duff record, and you were stuck with 75 or something, it's probably valuable ones now, but at the time you couldn't get rid of because too many had slipped in.
And just on a just for me, because I'm obviously been hustling records for a long time, but back then it's How did you order records from Jamaica when it's like, you know?
You'd phone up. John. You'd speak to John Dredd. You'd go down the post office. And you'd speak to him. He was a postman, and I never met him because I didn't go to Jamaica because after Far-I was killed, I thought, fuck it, I'm not. I've lost interest. I didn't make a reggae record for about 3 years. So I did that Time Boom with Style Scott and Lee Perry, but we'd phoned John, and he'd look, we've got a new Solomonic release, and it's just come in. I said, well, look, get me 200, or Gregory's got this done and this done. How many can you get me? So, boy, they've only done this many, and get me them all, and then get me a package and ship them off. We only did it about, to be honest with you, for about a 10-month period, maybe 10 shipments, but we actually did that though for a while. But we were competing with Black Wax, out of Birmingham, Keith and Brian. They worked together, Brian Harris, and they were importing very, very successfully through the Curry family, and it weren't worth it. And by that time, I'd done my first production, which I described to you, and rather than licensing tapes or importing things or getting involved in all the hassle, I could see a path for myself that I could just, hey, hang on a minute. If I start making these myself,
you can record them over here and like do stuff here.
I was selling as much, if not more, the first couple I did, than the ones I was licensing. And I didn't have people torturing me on the other side. They weren't really torturing me. It's difficult dealing with people's stuff because they need to make money. The expectations are high. And by the time I realised I could get away with calling myself a producer, I just blundered my way in and started learning my lessons quickly.
And how did those first releases do, the ones that you produced yourself and kind of put out yourself?
Well, the very first one, I gave Keith Stone a white label and said, give it to John Peel for me, because I knew Peel went in there, and he did. And then I swear to God, I was sat outside Westbourne Grove. It was one of the only places you could get late night things in London. There was an all-night, late-night shop there. There was Aries in Willesden we used to go to a black people shop where you could get, under-the-counter beers or anything at 4 a.m. It was great Aries, bless him, and patties and everything. That was nice. But if you were over, like Ladbroke Grove, you go to Westbourne Grove, to the supermarket there. And I sat out there in the car with Prince Far-I, and everyone used to listen to John Peel. I turned the show on, and John Peel starts the show, and he says, tonight I'm going to start the show by playing you the best dub record ever made in England. I thought, what was he going to play? And the first 3 tracks he played were my album. And I thought, fuck, he's playing our record. And Far-I goes, boy, blood clotting, you're up on hard hit. I was laughing at me, he's like, wow, that's great, kind of thing. I just sat there with Far-I in the car. I said, I can't believe it. I said, he's playing my record. I said, and he loves it. And I'd been up at Rough Trade and Jeff Travis trying to get him to help me do it, I was sorry, man, it's not really, we don't really, you can't, we're sorry, we can't, not really for us, Anyway, the next day, I've gone in Rough Trade shop, and my mate Steve Jameson's in there, and they're all going, bloody hell, Age, new record. I've gone in the back and just, that record's amazing, man. Can we have 300, please?
That's it. When you get people like John Peel on the BBC supporting it.
John Peel, not just me, countless other people, and the likes of Steve Barker at Radio Lancashire and other great people who championed what we were doing. We owe them a big debt because they were at the time, and still in Steve Barker's case, very important.
Definitely. When John Peel played my first single, because I had so little confidence when I started, those things are so important to kind of make you realise that you might have a go at a bit of a career in this. So
that's what happened, and then Far-I gave me a record, so that here's some tunes you might put them out, and there were all these instrumentals, and to be honest, they were okay. Some were good, some were average, And I cobbled together and gave it the name Crytek Dub Encounter Chapter 1. And we made that. We went in the studio with Tony, Crucial Tony, and Pablo, and Bigger Morris, and we overdubbed the tunes, added sound effects, lions roaring, and that did really well. So, and then I started just running sessions. And
so you got rhythms from Jamaica, and then you are overdubbing. And did you record Far-I on here on those rhythms, or?
We recorded the first album he ever did. I got off Pete Weston, produced by Lloyd E. Slim, licensed it for £400. No one wanted to release it. And I said, no, because Chips wanted to do some dub album that was awful. I won't even go into the name, but it wasn't awful, just boring. And then there was this tape. I said, this is amazing, and he gave me the benefit of the doubt, and we released that. Then I met Far-I. We ended up cobbling together the album called Message from the King, but we didn't have enough tracks to make up the album. So I went into... one of the first times I went in the studio, I went into the studio with Prince Far-I, Flabber Holt, and Fish Clark, and we recorded Foggy Road and The Dream.
Well, no wonder you stayed in music forever after that, because if you go into the studio with those kind of artists making that kind of music, that's like...
that was the first session. Do you know those songs?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. They're behind me. I mean, you can see some of my records, but like they're behind me there. And did you when you were there, did you think like, wow, this is something that I'm making here?
Well, I wasn't making it. I was just there. I'd hired the studio. I paid the studio.
But as a producer, without you doing that, they wouldn't have happened, But to be
that's one level of production. That's one. Production is also very much paying for it, and it's also making a decision of what to do and what not to do. Mm-hmm. So and then also as it goes on, the more and more active you become, it's up to you. But I did run that session, and it was a mad session. I won't talk about it now, but that was really great. And we did those two tunes and recorded the whole thing in like three, maybe 4 hours top back, and mixed it and then
mixed it everything.
Yeah, straight in, straight out. I mean, on that record, Flabber Holt's playing an out-of-tune rhythm guitar. It wasn't even tuned. You can listen to it. There's a couple of touches of guitar, and it's terribly out of tune. And it's basically, and then Fish Clark's hitting a bottle with some reverb on it. So there's the drums and bass. I can remember the bass line. The road is so foggy. And that he'd written when we'd driven from Birmingham together in the worst fog I'd ever seen in my life. I drove in this little van with him from Birmingham to High Wycombe. Well, just when I just met him, he wrote that on that night. We stopped in Wycombe because we didn't want to go to London. It was just too crazy.
What's Prince Far-I like? Because obviously, passed a long time ago, and such an amazing artist, the kind of artist you can't really imagine being around now.
Anyone who knew him would tell you he was fun. He was a big joker. And he was a right character, like having a lot. I remember him as he could be a right miserable bastard, but that was down to because he kept thinking he was ill and he had this real thing. I've written about this, but I don't want to go into too great a detail. But he would do it. He would do like Elvis Presley impersonations and standing on the table with a spliff, pissing himself and making everyone in the room laughing while he did impersonations and going and dusting people, hustling weed off people. He was a laugh. He was a good crack, and he got on with my mum and everything, She called him the honey monster. He sounded like that, "Where's the honey, mummy?" on the TV advert. It was a good. So when he got murdered, I was fucking devastated, really. Mm-hmm. And by that time, I was kind of just establishing myself on another level as a producer, and I didn't do any reggae from '83 till I put out Time Boom.
And how were those records received? Obviously, so you're making reggae in the UK. I mean, you're working with top notch like Jamaican artists, Flabber Holt and Prince Far-I. But how are they received? Is it a British thing and it's not as good, or?
Well, Far-I made his own records in Jamaica, so he kept making them in Jamaica and giving them to Trojan or giving them to whoever. And I got on my own way and did my own thing. By now, I wasn't like managing him. I could barely manage myself. So he was like, we set him up with Virgin. He then went to Trojan when Frontline got closed down. I know all the ins and outs of all the shenanigans of that bullshit as well. But that's another whole story.
Sure.
He went on carry on doing his own productions. He did a couple of tunes for me. He did a handful of tunes for me. Bedward, The Flying Preacher, Quante Jubilee, and a few others. But by then I'd moved, under the guise of Singers and Players, which I created. As my idea, it was going to become like a reggae supergroup. It never quite worked out, but the Singers and Players were some good records.
Yeah, for sure.
But my stuff, it was really interesting because I started getting a fan base of people. I had some reggae fans who really loved what we were doing. But I had others, like Rodigan, hated my production. He hated Creation Rebel. He still does to this day. Every time I see him, he's going, oh, God, you're not doing another Creation Rebel record. It's like fucking Luddite, Dave, like what's wrong with... And he just didn't like it. But in fairness to Rodigan, I have to hand it to him. At least I much prefer that somebody really doesn't like what you do than they're indifferent towards it. Mm-hmm. I'd rather they really like it or they don't than they're indifferent. And he's not really a big dub fan anyway. And I was into taking acid and mushrooms and getting stoned and tripping and listening to tripped out dub stuff. That's what I liked.
That's not really his cup of tea, and he's much more into Jamaican music.
Respect to him, because at least he's not a hypocrite, you know what I mean? And a lot of other people didn't like what I did, but then others loved it. So, and I didn't see the point making records that sounded like another person's tunes. I was always trying to, and after Far-I was murdered, I ventured right into another whole world that I was then actually making some good money, really doing well. It was only when I ventured back into the reggae world
it started getting wrong again. Because to continue that sort of legacy of dub, you say you loved all this kind of crazy psychedelic music and you like to kind of enjoy yourself as well and kind of get in the zone. It's like, because it seemed like in a lot of ways the baton was handed over from like kind of Jamaica to UK in terms of dub, because it's like, the work you were doing throughout the 80s is like, some really amazing like dub music being produced, which wasn't being made in Jamaica.
You look at the market. I met Tommy Boy during that period, the hip hop label, Tom Silverman. And Tom said to me, he said, the market we've got here is basically 12 to 14-year-old black kids. He says, and the fact that 35-year-old and older white intellectuals in London buy it, he said, great. That's what he said. Now, the market for dub, albums, was really created by record labels in London, like our labels, by people like Chips Richards, who put together these, or Chris at Greenseas. Those albums weren't real albums.
No, the Scientist albums, they were like selections of dub mixes, and they were marketed as albums separately here, weren't they?
Literally, you would get all the dubs off the B-sides, put them together, give them a funny cover, give it a silly name, and then it was lapped up by a lot of reggae fans, black, white, whatever. But it was perfect for the Smokey Bear market, students who might have been, or people from like 15 to in England, it got all the old heads, 40-year-old Smokey Bears in Manchester, who really loved their music, fans of Captain Beefheart and, great people like Roger Eagle and all these people, they were 40s, 50s. They loved the dub, maybe not my records, Augustus Pablo or King Tubby or Lee's, because they weren't having people preaching at them like the skinheads didn't like it when it got to the Rastafarian thing. It was instrumental, and it gave them a chance to just close their eyes and trip out meditate on the rhythms and the use of effects on it. And that, to this day, is what a lot of our fans are. They like to smoke. And it is quite political as well, even being instrumental in my mind, because it gathers all these generally like-minded good people who are spiritually conscious and aware of the planet and all sorts of things. I think the dub arena is quite a political one to this day, And back in that day, it galvanised a lot of people and got them together and created a community. And then you started seeing lots of these folk popping up at Jar Shaka gigs and other sound system gigs, and Misty and Roots and other people, and then there started being a lot more. Jar Tubby was an exception, but you started being a lot more white sound operators. And look at it now.
Well, before we move on to that sort of thing, one other in this kind of like period of like Prince Far-I and Hit and Run and whatever.
Hit and Run was a management company. Hit Run was
Bim Sherman. Someone you must get asked about all the time because you made such incredible records with the guy. So how did that kind of thing come about? Because that was,
I worked in Palmer Record Shop for a few months. I was managing it after Fitzroy Sterling left to start Body Music. And I thought I heard the first Bim Sherman record. This is probably 75, I think. And it just sounded like this voice from nowhere. It just completely touched my spirit. I was obsessed. Anything from that time with Bim Sherman. So I said to Far-I when I had the opportunity, look, if you get a chance to record him, please do. Or tell him he's got a big fan here. And then Joe Lloyd, I said the same thing. They both recorded a tune for me with him. And my friend Jar Whoosh, he recorded a couple of great tunes with Bim. And eventually I got the opportunity to invite him over in 79. He stayed at my mother's house. Yeah, brought him to England. Also Prince Hammer for the first time. And
what I'm always interested in people's, I was asking Earl 16 about it for the interview I did recently about kind of first impressions of like landing in the UK, coming from Jamaica as, young person coming to the UK in the 70s or whatever.
Well, he settled. He was looked after. He arrived. Some things happened that first trip that were just mental. It was a mad tour. I was like 21, and I brought over Style Scott to drum, Prince Hammer, who was like big. Well, he was quite big in like politics in Jamaica. Far-I, who was also linked up as well, because his best mate was Claudie Massop. And I also brought over Leroy Horsemouth Wallace for his first ever visit to England as well. So every time I see Horsemouth, he reminds me of that as well.
Nice.
So I've done, and Deadly Headley. I brought Deadly Headley over. I kept trying to get like something, you just want to keep going. And then, that next year I hit the wall and was virtually bankrupt, on money secured against my mum's house. I was in a fucking mess after that, But I did it, and I got through it. So Bim's first views of England, he loved it. He had a good time. Bim was the loveliest person you've ever met. He was really, really sweet, very good-looking, very kind-hearted, but a very serious man. And he came to England. Then he brought himself back to England, but he got in a little bit of trouble. And then he got married. And then it was more an arranged thing, but then had kids, and he ended up, staying in England. So he obviously liked it. I can't really speak about his first impression, but it was obviously a good one because he did like England and made it his home.
And obviously those records, they're still listened to now, and they've kind of got such a life. And like, were you when you were making those records, were you aware that it, like, what you were doing was really good?
Well, the funny thing is, I didn't really do that many records with Bim, contrary to belief. I helped him set his own label up, Century. I did one record in 1981, Across the Red Sea, which had some of his productions on it, like Golden Locks, and I did some of my own recordings with him to make up the Across the Red Sea album, like the title track and a few others. I then had him guest on some tracks with Deadly Headley for the Deadly Headley album, and he was involved in Singers and Players. So he kept popping up on Singers and Players tracks. And eventually I made the album Miracle with him, which really was nearly a massive success. It was actually, it was successful in that it must have sold 50,000+, but I didn't release that either that weekend on Mantra, Beggar's Banquet label. And, people associate a lot of his stuff, but I mean, a lot of those early tunes, he owned them, like the classic Jamaican recordings. And I tried to just do my best with him because I was like, he was my favourite singer. I loved Bim Sherman.
Yeah, me too. I love his voice. It's like, amazing. So just moving forward a little bit, looking at some of the stuff that's more sort of towards the end of the 80s and beginning of the 90s, it's like talking about introducing people to reggae and dub is like Dub Syndicate was a very, very big thing in that period.
Well, okay, Dub Syndicate was just a name I had. It was like Croatian Rebel wasn't a band. It was named after a Burning Spear song, and it was a studio project that turned into a band, and it was backing Far-I, and then it kind of fizzled out when someone went to jail and something else happened or whatever, and then so I then moved on to the Singers and Players name. I then switched to Dub Syndicate, where I hired musicians and used that name. And then when Style Scott Radix got a bit to a point where he wasn't enjoying it at all, and he wanted to, we were doing gigs in the name of Dub Syndicate, so I kind of gave him the name Dub Syndicate. Mm-hmm. And then we started producing together. And those records were Stoned Immaculate, mm-hmm. a great album, with our most successful, Echo Mania and I Tell Breakfast.
Because things like Stoned Immaculate, I remember them being like big hits and having because it was just in the sort of early dance music days, I guess, as well. And it kind of brought people from loads of different background, hippies and ravers and dreads, and everybody kind of, seemed to have a wide appeal. Stoned
Immaculate was a big album, and it was going good. We were having a good success with it all. Scotty, I kept saying, buy a place, and he bought a bit of land, but he was living in large racing cars on a racetrack in Jamaica, renting like nice places, thinking it would never end and whatever. And then I ended up going for a marriage breakup, and Onu was not in good shape, and I wasn't in good shape. So I said, look, I helped him start his Lion and Roots label, and then from, I think the last Onu Sound Dub Syndicate record was 1994 or 95. And then the one since, I helped him with a bit of additional production and mixing and stuff. But then the last 5 or 6 albums since then, half a dozen or so albums, came out on his own label, as I did with Bim Sherman, set their own labels up. I never tried to contract people or have somebody. I just thought things would grow and something would become massive. And I kept thinking Onu would become, instead of selling 20,000 or 30,000, we'd sell 10 times, 20, 100 times that. That's what I kept thinking, and it never worked out.
From the outside, it seemed like it was like a big hit. You know what I mean?
Well, they were successful. It was successful, but I must say, I put, all the money I did from my jobs over the years, and so I did some very good big ones. I just poured the money into the label to make the label work. So,
but it's funny, like obviously something that keeps coming up is this sort of risk entrepreneur putting stuff into it, and I guess risk really is like, that's what puts off a lot of people getting involved in music, I think. And you seem to have just like gone straight like into it, like 100%.
Well, my thing is probably like you. If it was about making tunes for money, I could have made a fortune. But I honest to God, I swear to you, I wasn't steered by trying to, let's make some house music, because the only time I did, in inverted commas, house music, I had a couple of top 20 hits, a top 10 hit, and a couple of that. But I couldn't sit there all day long hearing boof, 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 jing, dang, 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 dang. Like, oh my God, it was sending me mad. So I stuck to my guns, and I saw it like, let's say, art or something. I saw I was doing something that I wanted to do that was creative and I was proud of. It wasn't governed by thinking, let's go in and how do we calculate to use the chord structures that will deliver a successful record. And to be quite frank, I'm glad I didn't, because I might have had success, made loads of money, but I think I'd be dead now. I'd have probably overindulged myself even more than I did anyway. And then people lose interest in you. They think you're a wanker or something. You know, like you can't. They probably do think that would be anyway. But no, I don't regret doing how I did. It's just looking back on it with sadness, like the loss of so many of my close friends. You know, what could have been and whatever. Rather than remembering back just how brilliant those nights at like Gooseberry, or those nights on this gig, or those nights doing whatever, how great they were.
And those records, because that's what, like, I mean, I'm obsessed with records and music and releasing music and recording it, and like those records in people's collections, like mine, that people pull out regularly and listen to. It's like, you know, having that as a kind of a legacy that continues, and, you know, despite the ups and downs of like your career.
Well, the one thing I have got is I could do a challenge. I could say pull out those records over our catalogue, and it goes not just in the reggae area, you know, reggae vocal, reggae dub, African, psychedelic, industrial, funk, folk music, things like Ian King, jazz with Harry Beckett. I go right across my catalogue, and I'm actually a satisfied bloke. I feel satisfied, and I'm still able to go and make good records. And I'm still going to until the day I die. So I'm not even looking back with the regrets. The only things I feel sad about is perhaps things could have gone better for people. That's all. But what does it mean? What does it all mean? You know.
I mean, and do you have any advice for people who are like starting out and doing stuff now? And, you know, because it's obviously, because you've got a lot of experience in producing records, but releasing music, playing music live, and kind of, you know, across the board in the music world.
Just do as much as you can while you're inspired to do it. That's it. But you've got to try and find an end game. You know, it's like, and at the moment, I think that's the difficulty everybody's got. There isn't really, you know, before it'd be a gig would be the end game. I mean, like an end result or a payday. You know, because all aspiring musicians want to do is basically be able to live off doing what they love. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a musician. I'm kind of very lucky I lived through the time I did, because if now I've been born now, or if I was 17, 18 now, I don't know. I'd probably be like, oh, can I get on an engineering course or be doing something dodgy? I don't know what I would be doing. I really don't, because the only advice I can give to people is keep honing your skills on whatever you're doing, and get really good at a few things, and then bit by bit keep adding to those skills and enjoy yourself, you know. But it's a tough one to support yourself now doing music. So it's almost better you get into, you know, 2 or 3 bows to your arrow kind of thing, that you can do a few ways of trying to support yourself. As simple as that, because it's a tough one.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, you know, at the moment, we talked about it earlier on before we started the interview, it's like, you know, live stuff's not happening at the moment, and you're known as someone who, like, travels the world kind of playing music live, and it's kind of, and you've literally been all around the world playing music. That's right, isn't it?
I've been very lucky, but that was kind of forced on me. I used to quite happily just go and mix, you know, our groups a few times a year and stay at home making records. Then as it all kind of declined, I reinvented myself 20 years ago, kind of doing like live DJ dub shows because of necessity. And I didn't want to be just doing remixes of things I didn't have my heart in for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm. And so just sort of going forward, what stuff are you working on at the moment? Is there anything you can tell us about that's going to be coming out, and sort of new projects? Because you seem to always be busy, you know.
Releases is going to be a Horace Andy album followed by a dub accompaniment, just like we did with Rainford and Heavy Rain with Lee Perry. After that, there's a new Head Charge album, the first in over 10 years, which is as good as anyone ever made. It's absolutely beautiful. We've been making that between Ghana, America, doing a lot of it live and online, and I'm very, very proud of that as well. I've made the first Tackhead album in 30 years. which again is sounding stunning with Doug Wimbish, Keith LeBlanc, Bernard Fowler, Skip MacDonald. And I made the first Croatian Rebel record in 38 years, which sounds mad, but we're going to culminate a new album on that with a box set of CDs and stuff, probably in about 18 months from now. So I've got a new album with Jeb Loy Nichols, Itel Horns. I've made Pay It All Back Volume 8. There's going to be quite a lot of really...
That's a lot of stuff to look forward to, definitely.
That next couple of years kind of already, because of the lockdown, I've probably like everyone else, I've been working very hard. And I've got to make them to a standard that when I come out, when all this bullshit's, when we're allowed out of our cells again, and I start doing gigs, I've got a battery of great sonic weapons, and I've got a plan of a couple of years of excellent releases. I mean, really good. So I'm actually on using very healthy shape. And as for me, I'm going to start doing productions and mixing again, probably for quite... I've been doing some very good stuff with some American acts lately. And I did one recently for an act that did a really good job for Trent Reznor, which is, again, not the reggae world, but for an artist called Halsey. And all my mates go, who's Halsey? Who's Halsey? And people haven't heard the artist. Her last tune had 560 million streams.
Wowzers.
We're looking on a world now that has left us. It's no longer, I'm going to press a couple of thousand vinyl and I'm happy. It's that we are like marginalised ourselves. So I firmly believe it's only a matter of time before a fresh young artist comes with all the flavours that we love from the dub arena, the reggae world, and has 500 million streams his or herself. There will be a new superstar come out of all the things and all the years that we've been working on the sonic and the vibe and whatever, and all our peers and all the elders and our heroes. All that flavours are going to come up into cooking up one mighty big golden stream.
Yeah, I agree with you. You know what? I agree with you. I think like all this amazing work that we've been doing and the sort of underground or whatever, it does influence people, and I think someone's going to take that on board and make something that's going to like Bob Marley, whatever. People are going to
will be, and it will be something that we'll all be going, wow, it was only a matter of time we knew it, and then it might open the floodgates for a few more coming. And I hope it comes from Jamaica. I really do, because it would be great for the island again to have another here magnitude. But
well, listen, at the end of the interview, I ask everybody the same question as well, which is this Book of Dub question. So I've got my Book of Dub and I write everyone's name in it, and it's just something you'd want associated with you, like your life in reggae, a phrase saying whatever, So if I write Adrian Sherwood, what would you want me to write next to your name?
Deranged reggae fan who got his hands on a mixing deck. That would be good.
Perfect. That's perfect. That's the one.
Steve, it's been lovely chatting to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. It's much appreciated.
Thanks for joining me and Adrian for this 35th episode of the Life in Dub podcast. Don't forget to tell people about the podcast, share it around, and help get these amazing life stories out to more and more people. Remember, if you want to get in touch, the best way is to email me, vibronics@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and I'll see you all again for the next round of Life in Dub podcast after the summer.